Kia ora koutou katoa, kia kara kia tātou, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tai. E he aki ana, te atukura, he atiu, he huka, he hauhu, te hei Māori ora. Morena everyone, and I'm just going to do a quick acknowledgement. Te tuatahi I tika, ki mihi ki tau tātou, kingi tu heitia, o tātou te wherowhero, te tuawhitu, ka tahi anō, ka hoki ki te kupu, ki taupiri. Ko te kingi o te rangatahi, ko te kingi o te kotahitanga. Moi mai rā. Pēni anō e te ki, e tu ana, e te ahi, e te ara anō, e te ata, no reira, rei rātou, kia e rātou, tātou kia tātou, hoki mai ki tia ao kiko. He tiki anō te mihi e te ara kinui, kuini, nā wai hono e te pō tātou, te wherewhero e te tuawaru, aine mātou, e te tuhe tautoko, ia koere roto, e tu mahi whakahirahira, kia whai ana nā tohu, o te pāpā ki whakakotahi e te tātou katoa. Nō reira, ke te mihi, ka hore nā mihi e motu. Thank you. I know that last week we acknowledged the passing of King Tuheitia, but I thought it was important to acknowledge his burial, but also acknowledge the Queen's ascension to the throne. And I just want to obviously acknowledge her and say we stand in support of her, acknowledge the important work she has to help unite us all, and our acknowledgements to her and her whānau at this time. Kia ora. Okay, thank you. And thank you to the team who helped write that for me. I did not write it myself. Right, we have a number of apologies. We have absence from Councillor Bartley, Mayor Wayne Brown on Council Business, Councillor Turner and Councillor Dalton, who's unwell. We've got lateness from Councillor Newman and Councillor Fletcher, and early departure from Councillor Ferry and maybe Councillor Henderson, although I'm sure we will be efficient and everyone can leave at the end of the meeting because we'll finish on time. Could I please have a mover for that? Councillor Foley, Councillor Baker second. All those in favour?
Yeah, just sorry, Chair. It's Councillor Newman here. I am online, but sorry. I will, and I will remain online. But I hope to be there in person as soon as I can. I just got a private appointment. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Councillor Newman. And sorry, I hadn't looked up to see who was online. Duncan, would you just want to read out who was online?
Currently online, we have Councillor Walker, Councillor Leone, Councillor Filipina, Councillor Watson, Councillor Newman, and Councillor Sayers.
Kia ora, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? I'll have confirmation of the minutes. Councillor Ferry, Deputy Mayor. Any questions? All those in favour? Aye. Are there any petitions? There are no petitions, sorry. And we have one public input that was deferred from August. We have Northern Netball that are here. We have Phil Viver, the Chief Executive Northern Zone, and Karen Ross from Community. She's the Community Netball Manager. If you'd both like to come forward, nice to meet you this morning. And just the microphones in front of you, if to bring them a bit closer to yourself, and the button on the right just turns that on and off there for you. Thank you. So you've just got your 5 minutes with some questions, and yeah, welcome.
Kia ora. Thank you, everyone, and appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. We have recently finished the upgrade or update of the Auckland Region Netball Facility Plan, which is what we want to talk to you about today. If I can get this to work. There we go. So just a bit of background about Netball Northern Zone. So we're one of 5 zones under Netball New Zealand. We cover Auckland and Northland, spanning from community grassroots netball through to high performance, and we run the Northern Mystics team that play in the ANZ Premiership at the elite level. Across Auckland, we have 11 affiliated netball centres, and 7 satellite sites that are used for netball. There are approximately 173 clubs and schools engaged in netball activity, and it is the largest participation sport in secondary schools, full stop. So we're really proud of the heritage and history of netball, particularly in this region, but throughout the country. And in 2024, we're on track for growth of around 8% to lift our membership in the Auckland area to just under 42,000 participants. And we have growing diversity, so an increasing number of boys participating in the sport, which has traditionally obviously been a female sport. So we have, from those 11 centres, quite a diverse range, so a smaller centre, Waiuku, with just 6 netball courts, up to Auckland Netball Centre, which has 30 courts, a mixture of indoor and outdoor. So we have been on this journey for some time now. The purpose of the Code Facility Plan is to provide district-wide analysis and direction on the needs and priorities. And we've been held up by Active as an exemplar in this area, having established the work first in 2011. 2015, we established the Auckland Regional Netball Facility Working Group, which has representatives from Auckland Council, from Active, and from netball people across the region. And through those collective efforts, we have been successful in securing just over $5 million across the last 7 years to improve netball facilities. And a thank you to this committee for approving a grant last month of a further $1.6 million for the North Harbour Netball Centre to enable them to improve their building facility there. So it's really a big thank you from us to the Council for your ongoing support of netball. For 2024 plan, we really wanted to focus on 3 key areas. Do we have enough courts to meet demand into the future? Our netball facilities of a sufficient quality to provide good playing experiences? And is our netball provision sustainable, both financially and also in the face of other environmental issues such as climate change and the floods affected some of our netball centres, which highlighted that issue for us to consider. So the plan itself, which you can view in more detail, has plenty of detailed analysis, and we thank Visitor Solutions who authored the report on our behalf. And so we've taken a really wide view, looked at participation, catchment analysis. So this graph just shows the distribution of participation across the different local board areas. And we looked at different future participation scenarios, looked at refining our demand and supply modelling to try and anticipate where growth will come over the next 10 to 15 years. We assessed the quality of facilities, the climate resilience and ownership models of current provision, and an individual report for each of our netball centres has been produced as part of it. So the key findings from the report, just to highlight a few. So the future participation is forecast up to between 47 and 63,000, depending on how optimistic the modelling is. Geographically, we have no spatial gaps, but there are local boards with lower participation, particularly in the south. So we need to look at that and consider the factors that are impacting there. Court quantity perspective, Netball North Harbour is shown to be under the most demand pressure now and in the future. And we think initially this can be addressed through satellites, but we'll definitely need more courts in the north over the next few years. Several other netball centres have potential demand pressure depending on participation trajectory. From a quality perspective, Howard Pakaranga and Rodney, which is based in Wellsford, are both facing critical issues. And if not addressed soon, we risk having around 20 unplayable courts, which will cause supply issues. Beyond these critical issues, we need to continue investing in upgrading courts to rubberised surfaces to minimise injuries and prolong player engagement. And whilst it's a winter sport and we play outside largely, poor weather is still a detractor for young people coming into the sport, and so looking at covers and other ways to provide protection is also part of the plan. And building issues at North Harbour, Manurewa and Rodney netball centres as well. So from a sustainability of provision, interesting, there's different ownership models that we need to look at and consider, which has impact on who pays for what and how it gets maintained, that we need to keep considering. So in terms of priorities and what we need from council, obviously looking at Netball Rodney as a key priority. Unfortunately, some work that was planned has been deferred, and renewing 12 courts at Hauck Pakaranga, which has some money set aside currently in the council local board budget to adhere to, and obviously North Harbour with their building works and future growth opportunities there. So in conclusion, we just wanted to provide a quick overview of where netball's at and our forward planning of facility provision. So thank you for the opportunity.
Kia ora, thanks for the very clear presentation and all the work you all do, and especially all the volunteers who I know are the kind of backbone of what you do. Thank you for those comments. We've got 2 questions already. Councillor Fully.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thanks, team, for your presentation. My questions are about that disparity we see in terms of participation in areas of high deprivation in South Auckland. Like in slide 4, it's pretty telling, that pattern where you've got more affluent areas have very high participation, and then you get to South Auckland, areas of high deprivation with very low participation. And I note in my ward, the Manukau ward, probably the lowest participation. And yet I know that a lot of talent is in that area, netball talent, and generations of netball talent through the PIC Church and through our Pacific sports networks. So I'm interested to hear from you what your plans are to address those issues, equity issues, to boost participation in those areas, etc.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess there's a couple aspects to that. The participation numbers here are through our netball centres, so it may not capture the full participation through the likes of the church networks and things, depending on where their membership participation. That aside, we certainly see this as an issue that we need to address. We've received some tūmanawa funding where we have some participation initiatives heading through Manurewa and Papakura netball centres to try and boost participation, get people into local schools, to introduce them to the sport, and then try and grow participation from there. So yeah, certainly the work that this project has done has really just highlighted that fact that more emphasis needs to be placed in that area.
Kia ora, thank you. Sorry, Chair, just my parting comment, if you can look at Otara. Ngāti Otara has just been, the local board has just supported some money to improve those netball courts, but also yes. Colma. Kia ora, yes. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baker.
Yeah, thanks, and look, well done. I'm interested where the Stars fit into your run the Mystics, and then we've got the Stars out south. Obviously, haven't had a great year this year, but just in regards to, so it's obviously very, very netball focused. What work, and I was sort of trolling through the Visitor Solutions report earlier on, just trying to find mention about how we can get greater use. I mean, very much a winter sport, and go anywhere near one of the centres during the season, and it's absolute managed chaos. So well done. But how can we get, is there any plans or any discussions or any thinking in regards to how we can actually get greater use of those courts which require huge amounts of public money going into them? How can we get more public having access to those for other sports or other activities?
Yeah, kia ora, thank you. Yeah, it's certainly something that we talk to our centres about, and there are many examples of where that happens. So, for example, with Auckland, through the summer, they have tennis use the courts, so they turn into tennis courts through the summer. Certainly in terms of the indoor venues, there's plenty of multi-use from other sports to trade, different commercial fairs and that sort of thing for indoor facility use. So obviously our focus is netball, but we are cognizant of the need to maximise the use of the facilities across the region.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Newman online.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm interesting presentation. there's been a lot of work on the rubberisation of the netball courts in Manarewa and Papakura. Take the point of respect to the building issues at the Netball Manarewa Centre, hoping to address that soon. My question is, as we do all of that work, what is the financial cost to a family for a young person to be registered and participating in netball each season? What is the cost to a family in South Auckland for that child, that junior, getting involved, participating? What's the cost of registration, the equipment, all of the costs that they will face, which could be the financial barrier to that child participating in that sport?
You can throw that to
Yeah,
me,
no,
aren't
no,
you?
I don't have those numbers specifically in front of me, but
Here is presenter.
it does vary from centre to centre, and the local centre is the one that kind of sets the charge. I know from my own kids' experience who play at the Pakuranga Centre, sort of anywhere from $80 to $200 for the season, depending on the level and age and stage. But then I guess you'd have shoes and other equipment and things on top of that. So certainly financial could be a barrier for some.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ferry.
Thanks. My question sort of picks up on the direction Councillor Baker was going in. And you mentioned tennis, and I used to play tennis in the summer on the harbour courts, and then very badly play netball for my school, which was Carmel. They made us play for 3 years. In the winter. So what I was curious about was what that relationship is like with tennis in particular. That's obviously the natural fit and the one that historically has been there around that maximising use of the courts, about potentially shared investment, shared facilities. Thanks.
Yeah, it's an ongoing relationship that we're trying to continue to build, I suppose. There is some variation in the type of surface that tennis and netball use, so it's not perfectly aligned, but at a junior sort of introductory level, certainly there's, I think, more that could be done in that space, to get that summer-winter differential. Although, from a netball perspective, many of our centres are now rolling into summer league competitions, and so the usage from a netball point of view, whilst it drops, doesn't completely drop away through summer, with the introduction of summer league competitions.
Thanks. I think we have a similar issue with soccer and cricket sharing facilities, where the soccer season is starting to extend into the summer, and times when traditionally we would have had the fields available for cricket. So there's a demand sort of issue to deal with, and basketball's the other one, which traditionally they're a bit softer, so they play inside, but trying to get them to move and utilise some outdoor courts is another way that courts could be increased usage as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I am being liberal with questions today, but we've got 3 more and we'll cut it there. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. And look, thank you very much for what you do especially for our young people. That's fantastic. I suppose my question is to you, Chair, or to staff. Are the stars aligned here? So the need that you're identifying and the investment that you're identifying, is that something that we have picked up and we are fully across by way of a deliverable from our end, a combination of both local board investment and regional investment to make sure we're all heading to the same place at the same time? I hear your side. I just want to know that it's matched by our side. So I don't know whether you can talk to some discussions or whether, Chair, you can come straight in with that.
It's definitely, from my perspective, a little bit of both. So there will be, and I won't speak for organisation, but there's a strategy moving forward. There's work with the organisations and the kind of major organisations around the city. With this extra funding that was approved through the LTP, we're looking at to make sure that there is a clear kind of let's get some projects underway or done. But obviously the groups apply to local boards for maybe, don't want to say lower level things, but it might be like nets or different things at a different scale than the kind of capital budget. So although I imagine you guys are trying to follow and work together, that's why you're here representing more than just one club.
Yes, and the Regional Facilities Working Group for netball has Auckland Council representation on it, so we try and use that group to inform and work together to find the solutions. I guess the challenging part at the moment is with Rodney and the Wellsford courts, where some budget was allocated and that's been deferred through to 2026 to a point where those courts are almost unplayable, and so we are trying to address the short-term issue there before that work can be conducted.
Yeah, I suppose you can see where I'm coming from. I'm quite keen to know regionally, between all the arms of council, local boards and us, what our investment is in Auckland netball. And then I want to understand what we need to invest. And am I confident that there's a path between the two, identifying that you have said we've got a critical area in Rodney, and I just want confidence that, potentially we'd relook at that and try and make it all work. Identifying you're one of X number of sports that we have to deliver for.
Yeah, in my perspective and what I've seen, it's all about relationships and clear lines of communication, because a lot of our funding is contestable, so we can't kind of necessarily direct people not to apply at a certain time or to apply, but then some of that new 35 million or whatever it is, we might be looking for more of a targeted approach that maybe isn't as contestable, that takes us into priority areas, but that's still being developed at the moment. Thank you. Last two questions, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, question about netball North Harbour and
Councillor Watson, your speaker might be covered. We can only hear you very faintly.
Is that better now, Mr. Chair?
No, I don't. Yeah, we could.
I'm not sure what more.
But we'll try our best to. We'll try and turn it on at our end.
Okay.
Okay. That's a bit better. That's a bit better.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So a question on netball North Harbour, and understand the building upgrade following the flooding, but in terms of that additional capacity, all roads have led to Onawa Domain for decades now. It's like a tsunami on Saturdays of people from all over. What is the availability, the current availability of other courts that could be upgraded? And I'm thinking you mentioned the huge demand in the north, where all those kids, certainly at secondary age, have to, journey 30, 40, 50 minutes to get down to Onawa every day or every week. Is there existing capacity in courts that can be upgraded? Has that been identified, or would it require, a whole new big block of land? And I think particularly given the phenomenal growth in places like Milldale, Millwater, that are just going through the roof. So is there courts there that have been identified already that could be utilised, or do we have to look at acquisition?
There are courts. So Hibiscus Coast on the peninsula have some courts that are used for junior netball. Netball North Harbour uses a number of satellite venues trying to get access and better access into the school network, who obviously have a number of courts that could be utilised. There have been some greenfield sites identified over the last few years which haven't necessarily come to anything as yet. So certainly the short term is to maximise the utilisation of existing courts, because obviously a new development is much more significant from an investment point of view.
Thank you. I think Councillor Watson, are you?
Yep. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. And last question, Member Hanade.
Oh, kia ora. And thank you. I want to look at this from a kura kaupapa view. My kids, me, and now my mokos are all involved in netball, either Wednesday or Saturday or whenever. Is there a specific push for more participants in that area?
Kia ora. Are you talking about specifically from a kura kaupapa point of view? So there is an organisation that has been established that established the first Punirau tournament out at Netball Waitakere, and they have established themselves as a separate organisation specifically to bring netball and also now other codes, creating tournament days and environments that are fully Reo based. So we're sort of working with them in partnership.
So, understanding that there's not a lot of money for everybody, because that's the way it is, and until we find a mechanism where we can pay for everybody in terms of where they go and play. And I'm glad that you mentioned Te Pai Courts, because I used to live there on a weekly basis. It seems to me that what's not working, maybe, is the use of our schools, for courts. And every time you turn up to school, there's a court. Why aren't we using school facilities as much as we should?
Yeah, good question. And I suppose this is a question for sport in total too, is there's for a long number of years now been an attempt to work the Ministry of Education to create better access between community sport and school sport, and that has been challenging for a whole range of reasons. Netball is played within schools, and at schools, I should say, but I opportunity to try and do more, but it is a challenging space with schools having their own demand and their own views on what utilisation should happen within those schools.
Kia ora, thank you. Thanks very much for coming in. I think those questions help get a bit more information out of you, so thank you. We did go way over time, but I think it's an important subject and we only have one public forum today. So do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor, Seconder, Councillor Foley? All those in favour? Aye. Thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.
Kia ora, thank you.
Right, we go. We do not have any extraordinary items. We do not have any local board input. And we'll go straight to item 8. We've got Dr. Imogen Bassett and Sam Hill. And we've got the approval of the early public consultation materials for the Regional Pest Management Plan 2030-2040. Scary thinking that we're almost, working towards 2030. But we'll get you to kick off. Just the button on the right there.
Right one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Kia ora koutou. Thanks for having us this morning. Yes, I'm Imogen Bassett. I'm supported by our General Manager, Sam Hill. And so as Councillor Hills has pointed out, this is a really very early preliminary stage of the Regional Pest Management Plan. So today we'd like to request your approval of the early consultation documents. I'll give you a little bit of context about what the Regional Pest Management Plan is for those of you who may not already be familiar with it, and where we are in the process and the kind of framing for this document. So Regional Pest Management Plan is a regulatory document. It's created under the Biosecurity Act. This is part of our regional council function. And it's about us giving effect to our regional leadership role, which we're mandated under the Biosecurity Act. So it's about coordination of pest management across the region, so it's not about those things that are sort of for individuals to manage that really pertain just to them, but it's about what can we achieve collectively as a region, and it's basically a long list of different species that we name as pests, and then we set outcomes and rules or deliverables that we put towards achieving those outcomes.
And it's very broad ranging, so it can be anything from possums to Cody dieback to fish or anything that's an exotic species, so it's quite a wide-ranging plan. And we have a currently operative plan which is funded by our natural environment targeted rate. And that current plan is scheduled to go through to 2030, which may feel like it's still quite a long way away, but we actually know that the Biosecurity Act processes are quite cumbersome and lengthy, and so we really do need to get cracking in order to make sure that we have a new plan in place by 2030. We also know, irrespective of that sort of regulatory imperative, it's also timely for us to think about what might have changed and how we adapt our plan. So we know 10 years is a really long time in pest management, and we're seeing new patterns of new species emerging as pests all the time, and that's very much linked to new things coming into the country from international trade. We also have things which might have already been in the country for a long time, but which start to become a problem. We know often there are quite long lag times for pests, so they can be around and not look like they're a problem, and then they start to become more apparent as a problem as time goes on. And we also know that as our demographics, our land use changes, all of those sort of human activities really alter what's going on. And we also know that our community's views on things are changing all the time as well. So it's really timely for us to reconsider as a region, what do we think are the priorities in this space. So just to sort of recap on the time frame, so we came to this committee in a workshop earlier this year to give you some preliminary insight and get some feedback from yourselves about this phase of the consultation process. And then today is that point where we get you to approve the consultation materials. Later this year, for a 6-week period centred around October to December, we'll have that public consultation process. And then that's feeding in alongside a whole lot of other activities towards creating a draft new proposed plan, and that will be the full, that's the main public consultation phase, which is not till 2027. So this is where we're at today, is really much a preliminary fact-finding, information gathering phase that will help us then work towards that 2027 consultation. And then from there we expect that once we've done submissions analysis and potential court challenges and that sort of thing, we'll have an operative plan in place from 2030. So so whilst we're going out for seeking some feedback from the public at this early stage, that's not the only thing that's feeding through to that 2027 consultation on the proposed plan. So alongside, we've already underway with our mana whenua engagement. We will have quite an extensive program of engaging with both internal and external stakeholders over the next couple of years to make sure that we understand their views and potential priorities and impacts on them. And meanwhile, our team are also busily doing a whole lot of technical review, looking at what do we know about the various different species and the values that we're trying to protect. So the consultation that we're asking from the public at this early stage won't cover all the things in the plan, bearing in mind that we've got over 300 species of pests in our existing plan already, so as I say, very broad. We're not asking about all of them at the moment, but just a few sort of key issues where we know there are some emerging big ticket new problems coming along, and we don't have them in our current plan. We don't know necessarily how the public feel about them. So asking about them, and then some other cases where we've got existing pests, but we think we don't understand enough about the current public views on them, and we want to really understand more. But plenty of other views will be canvassed through more targeted stakeholder engagement. So in terms of those early public consultation topics for the public, we've got these 5 topics that we specifically want to ask about. But in addition to that, there'll be an open-ended question at the end. So if anybody has other issues that they want to raise, and we know that there will be lots of other things that the public will want to let us know about, then they can raise whatever those points are in that open-ended question. And the framing for this early public consultation will be very much about the outcomes that we want to achieve. So, we know that focusing on the pests, the killing side of thing or whatever, that's is quite negative, quite disengaging for a lot of people, and actually it doesn't give effect to what is, we don't do pest management just for the sake of it. We do it because we're trying to protect something, right? And so the consultation will be branded Let's Protect Our Environment, and the key messaging will be really around how do we all together as a region protect the things that Aucklanders value, and that's things like our Indigenous wildlife, our farming, primary production, our cultural values, those sorts of things. So we'll be making a real effort to make sure that we get this out to interest groups and wide audiences. So there'll be a range of avenues for that. We'll have webinars, drop-in sessions. A lot of our strategy will be around direct sort of marketing to stakeholder groups, because we know this is quite a niche topic from our previous consultations. We don't think it's worth spending lots of money on talking into the ether to the general public, because a lot of people aren't really that engaged with this sort of thing, but we've identified that there are particular issues where people are above averagely likely to be interested. We'll be making an effort to really push that out through those existing networks to make sure that people are aware. And really working as well to make sure that we're reaching a diverse range of Aucklanders through a variety of different channels as well. So just to sort of recap in terms of the next steps, after today's approval and then that consultation period centred on November, then we'll be looking to do submissions analysis. We'll bring that back to yourselves in the middle of next year. We'll also be taking those submissions analyses to local boards in the middle of next year, and so they'll have an opportunity to see what have their local constituents said about these issues, and then they can provide some feedback as well. And alongside all of that, as I said, we'll be doing our mana whenua and stakeholder engagement carrying on, and then we'll be coming back to yourselves to do some workshopping and things to then get to that point of having a new plan, a proposed plan, that we can consult on in 2027, which will be aligned with the long-term plan consultation. So I think that's it from me, but happy to take questions through the chair.
Kia ora, Imogen. Thank you. I'll just go to the resolution just to make sure, in case I didn't get a chance to talk to Member Ashby, but I spoke to Member Henare. There was just a missing haukura in that one. It was just a mistake.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, that was an oversight. Apologies.
Thank you. So just to be clear, everyone, this is not the first and only time we will be consulting, and the big plan will be the big consultation, but this gets us on the road and helps us and the community kind of work towards what will be in that final plan, on top of and building on all the great work that is in it from the last time, which feels very recent. Councillor Walker online, I've got a number of questions.
Sure. When I attended the last Hauraki Golf Forum, we had a presentation around avian bird flu, which you'll be familiar with. And it's very, very clear that not only is this an emerging threat, but there's a high likelihood of its transmission with potentially catastrophic consequences for a range of species, birds, but possibly other species. So is this something that that we can bolt on in terms of the submission process, so that we use it to generate some awareness, but also some preparedness? And the related issue, of course, is that if and when this occurs, the budgetary implications will be significant. I mean, of an order of magnitude far worse than Kalupa.
Kia ora. Through the chair, yes, that is a significant concerning issue. I think we're not looking to sort of bolt it onto this particular consultation, in part because we're looking really at the moment to be clear that the central government is leading the preparedness and response for bird flu, and so our role in that is really around amplifying central government messaging at this stage. And the other thing, I guess, to consider is that because it's not currently in the country, it's not really compatible with what is normally considered to be in scope for us consulting on for a regional pest management plan. I think notwithstanding that, absolutely acknowledge that there is a real importance that we are, as I say, amplifying those communications, and that our communities are really aware of this and know what to do. We also don't want to panic people, though. That's the other thing. So there's a real sort of fine balance to be had there. We are working really closely with central government to make sure that we've got preparedness in place, and we don't know at this point how bad it will be, but yeah, we're working really hard to make sure that we're as well prepared as we can be.
Thank you, Imogen. And yes, I think we've sent memos out on that back in April or May, but I think it would be good if there is more information to be refreshed to send out to the full committee.
I think we have yes, we've got a memo in train to be coming back to you with more information. Thank you.
Member Ashby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, look, a good approach, I think, and good to see cats on the agenda. Just a couple of clarifying questions from me. One is, do we have a handle on on the cost of the problem of pests to our regional economy, in terms of the importance of maybe putting that message into the scheme of this? Is that within scope? So, and I know the numbers are probably, the numbers are hard to nail down, but there's a couple. So MPI came up with, these are national ones, 9.2 billion a few years back, and some work from University of Auckland placed it at 12 billion, and these were on the lower end of what they thought. Do you think, do we as, does council have a handle on that kind of scale at a regional scale, and do you think that would be useful context to front foot into this, just to communicate the need?
Yes, I think that's a really good suggestion, and I've made a note to just add some more of that sort of financial clarity to our consultation materials. I think it's a very complex exercise to quantify the costs of pests, and particularly you get into some complicated things about which values are actually appropriate to monetise. But notwithstanding that, there are some data available that can at least give an illustrative sense of the scale of the impact on some monetary values. So I think we could absolutely build some of that in. So yeah, great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. The other one is, just so I guess it's clear in my head, because I know that through the RPMP you can tag unwanted or pest plants, and you work with nurseries. Does that extend to the retail sector? So, I guess it's hooked to my last point around money and the cost, both in terms of the cost to nature, but also the economic cost and the labour of volunteers. Spending probably the equivalent of millions in one catchment, pulling, I don't know, jasmine out, and then you can go down to Bunnings and buy some jasmine and plant it right next to where you just pulled it all out. Is that kind of thing within scope, or is that more of an MPI?
No, it is in scope. So I said that the Biosecurity Act processes are very lengthy. One of the things that makes them really lengthy is that there are some quite detailed requirements on us in terms of articulating the benefits and costs, both of inaction and also of our proposed course of action, and in some cases you might optioneer other options as well. So we will need over that period of time to look at how do we, it doesn't have to always be quantified as money, but we do need to be able to articulate in some way these are the costs that are associated with allowing these species to continue on their course of invasion, or conversely, here are the costs associated with action.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And just two more from me. Good to see, there's one of the focus areas at this initial round on predator-free islands, but just a question around what about predator-free mainland sanctuaries, and is that, I guess that's going to come in the fullness of time in the actual plan, but also I guess the importance of those at a regional biodiversity level, both existing ones and potential ones. Is that, I know it's in scope, but what are your thoughts around?
Yeah, I mean, we know that islands are defendable and achievable in a way that sort of elevates them beyond the mainland in many ways. On the other hand, we do know that there are some areas on the mainland that are, have incredibly high biodiversity values still, such as Waitakere ranges. And so whilst we've kind of tailored the public question to islands and to an extent peninsulas, because we want to temper that expectation about what is realistic and feasible, but that's not to preclude being able to have wider conversations about what else might be important on the mainland. And our current plan has a real focus on protecting Te Waunui and Waitakere and Hunua as significant areas of mainland biodiversity protection, and we can absolutely be looking at what we should be doing in that space going forwards. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And the last one from me is just the report notes the importance or value of some introduced species. I think pigs is the example for subsistence sort of hunting. Are there other examples that you might use or draw on of other exotic species being identified as important in similar ways to communities, and in particular Māori communities?
Yeah, so I think this is something that we have to be really cognizant of in biosecurity, is that many of the things that can cause harm in some circumstances can also actually be really valued by people in other circumstances. So that's part of our framing of how we're communicating this, is to really be acknowledging of those values. So many things might be a valued garden plant, or they might be a hunting resource, or all sorts of different ways in which they might be valued. For Māori in particular, we do know that pigs and deer and goats as sources of kai are really key issues, and we will be looking to really explore that through our mana whenua engagement and think about, we know that there's not a homogenous view on that, so it might be different in different places, and there are things that we can absolutely explore about what's appropriate spatially. We don't have pig control, for example, in our current plan on Aotea, because we had a clear steer at the time from Ngāti Rehua, Ngāti Waiki Aotea, that that pigs are an important subsistence food source there. So we can explore that on a rohi by rohi basis.
Cool, that was it. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Member Ashby, Councillor Darby.
Thanks, team. Thank you for this. Just in the current plan, we identify cats brackets unowned as a pest, but we don't have any registration system for cats. So we say unowned, but there's no system to identify the owned and the unowned. So what is our discussion on cats this time? Because I feel like we do need to have that discussion about cats, because the evidence is overwhelming in terms of what cats do to Indigenous wildlife. So what is our, are we going to be brave enough to have this discussion? At what level are we going to be having it?
Yeah, so and cats are a great example of one of these species which absolutely do have significant environmental impacts, and at the same time very valued by over 40% of our households have them as much loved family members. So we have to be cognizant of that balance. But the good thing is that many of those responsible pet ownership behaviours like registration actually are good for cats as well as wildlife. So for example, we know that after the Christchurch earthquakes, 85% of microchipped and registered cats were returned to their owners, or pets in general, were returned to their owners, whereas only 15% of unregistered animals were. So, there's incredibly clear benefits of these things for the cats themselves as well as the wildlife. So, our consultation document is really looking at that nexus of responsible pet ownership that is a win-win. And so what we've proposed is that we look at a range of different responsible pet ownership behaviours, desexing, microchipping and registration on the companion animal register, which already exists and which is a rapidly growing trend in cat ownership, as that registration is becoming much more common. and also keeping cats at home on the property as well. And we're looking at what do people feel about those different types of behaviours in potentially different spatial extents. So, how does the Aotea community feel about those things on Aotea versus how might people feel on potentially another motu or on the mainland across the region, or with a focus on areas that are right near threatened species. So we've got those questions in a kind of a matrix of the different spatial extents, so people can indicate how they feel about them in different situations. We've also asked a question there based on some of the feedback that we had from Councillor Sayers, I think, at the workshop around how do Aucklanders feel about us providing more support to desexing and microchipping in a non-regulatory sense. So, we know that desexing rates historically have been quite high, but they've taken a little bit of a dive down post-COVID and the current sort of cost of living crisis and that sort of thing, and that represents a potentially long-term burden for us in terms of the costs of that. So, so we're absolutely asking the question, but really at pains to make sure that we're communicating in this in a way that feels positive for cat owners as well as people who love wildlife.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. And also so that's the cat discussion. I'm sure there'll be a lot more of it. On the existing list, dogs, feral dogs, I can't see them identified.
No, because unlike cats, there is national legislation around dogs, and so dogs are managed through our bylaws process. So we haven't included them in the RPMP, and I don't know off the top of my head of any councils that have done that.
Okay, so because they're managed elsewhere through bylaws and other legislation, they're not on the list.
Correct. Yeah.
Even though we know feral dogs do incredible damage in the bush, northern brown kiwi, which will be in our region as well.
Yeah. And so there's nothing in the Biosecurity Act that precludes us from including them. So, I mean, it is something that we could look at.
Can we look at that? Look, I've got some personal experience. I'm not going to tell you all my parochial stories, but forest and bird, have got a lot of evidence there that the damage that feral dogs are doing as well.
Yeah, and I think through our organisational refresh, we're now in the same directorate as the animal management, regulatory and licensing teams, and we're really looking at how we can work more closely with them on some of these pet ownership things that really there's definitely an interface there.
And the last one, I don't want to run off all the species, but the eastern rosella, that's not on the current list. Is it proposed to be added to the list, the eastern rosella?
Yeah, so it's in, if I remember correctly, it's in an exclusion program for Aotea, but for the mainland, it's not. So we did propose it, and then that was removed as a result of the judicial review proceedings with the New Zealand Parrot Society. Our approach has been really to focus, though, on the species which aren't already widespread. So eastern rosella is a good example of how widespread exotic parrots can quite rapidly become if we don't manage them effectively. But really the sort of sweet spot is to get in before that happens. So our focus is very much on things like Indian ringnecks, monk parakeets, and so we will be looking at what parrot species are potentially a risk that we might want to preemptively manage. But also, again, we know that these are really valued by people, and so we'll be making sure that we're really engaging with the Parrot Society and other stakeholders around that to understand this situation.
Great, thank you. I'm happy with the follow-up on the feral dogs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, Imogen, Sam, as a councillor, I'm incredibly proud of the work that you do, and especially the support that we get through the Hauraki Golf Forum and the representation that we're able to bring on behalf of Auckland Council. My question was really posed in part by Wayne Walker. So avian flu is not, but how do you interface at the moment on issues like that? We mustn't undermine the work that central government must do, but how are you interfacing with MPI on these and other challenges right now?
Yeah, so we've been involved in some interagency planning on that. So our colleague Phil Brown went down to Wellington recently for a scenario planning day that involved representatives from the Ministry for Primary Industries, Department of Conservation, Ministry of Health, other councils, and so really working together to make sure that we do understand, and all of those government agencies have got different parts of the puzzle that we're really making sure that we're connecting well with. We've got an operational structure in place that's got connections with them through our technical advisory groups and those different operational work streams that are aligned with an emergency response SIMS function, so that we're ready to go, in the event of this moving from preparedness to response.
Yeah, I'm aware that there's quite a few, there's a lot taking place with the Callurpa at the moment. I think on the 6th of September there was a really critical meeting, and so it's good to know that there's going to be a bit of a seamless approach between government, central and local, on those particular matters. So I won't interrogate you any further on that, but it's reassuring to know that there is a plan in place. How are you going to interface with the newly formed Parks Committee if we're looking at the timeline of this going forward? And obviously some of the work that's being undertaken within regional parks will come under the delegations of the Parks Committee. Have you thought about how that, with the consultation that's going out, might be undertaken?
Yeah, this goes to we know that the pest management plan has got some significant implications for parts of our organisation, and parks is one of them, but not the only one. And so absolutely we've looking at a significant program of internal socialising and making sure that we've got those connections. We understand what their views are, what their needs are, and how the pest management plan might serve to protect parkland and the values on that, because we know that there are some really high ecological values that are in public ownership, and so that's a really important component of what we can protect for Aucklanders. So yeah, absolutely, we will connect on that.
Oh, that's great, because that's a good way of capturing all the volunteers that we need championing this for us. And the final question I had is, can you tell me a little bit more about freshwater gold clams?
I can. We don't want them. It's the short thing. So they're only known from a couple of locations. So they were first found in the Waikato River, and we know that they have a really bad track record overseas of being very problematic. So they have up to 70,000 offspring a year, and those offspring are microscopic initially. And so if you've been using your boat or your wetsuit, whatever, in water that has the clams present, you can have the baby clams on your gear and just not be aware of it because you can't see them. But they're very, very hardy. So when you take your wetsuit or whatever and then go the next day to another water body, those clams can still be alive. And so really, in order to prevent them transferring to another water body, you need to get your gear disinfected and then completely dried, and from the point that it's dry, it needs to be dry for 48 hours, which is quite a hard ask. So we know that the risks are quite high of them being moved into the Auckland region. There is national collaboration going on, so we're feeding into all the regional councils, again working with central government to look at how do we manage this with a national view to trying to contain it as much as possible into that Waikato area. But it is a hard ask, and so that's why we've thought about in our region what are the things that we could do to really protect some of our important water bodies. We know it's not just an environmental problem from an infrastructure perspective. They clog up water takes. We're already starting to see some impact on the water care intakes that are in the Waikato area and that sort of thing. And so it could potentially be very problematic if we end up.
Well, thank you. That's really helpful.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. And I think, well, yeah, it would be good to have a bit more information. We did have the presentation on gold clams, but then that was when Callurpa was first on the scene as well. So it would be good to have a bit more information. I know Watercare sent us some information earlier in the year as well, but just how that has changed over the last 18 months, if anything.
Yeah, we can do that.
Right, Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. To return to cats for a moment, acknowledging that's going to be the big topic of discussion. You mentioned before in your answers to Councillor Darby around the different framework legally for dogs. And I'd just be interested to see through this early engagement process whether we have any ideas that come up around engagement with central government around potential legal frameworks for dealing with cats, or indeed other pests that currently don't have those kinds of frameworks. So are we acknowledging that, you know, we don't sign off on this plan and it doesn't come into implementation until 2030, but is it possible that if we're getting a strong sense of community support, or there's some ideas that come through that could be really useful in this space, we can raise those with central government earlier? How does that sort of roll out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that in the last term of government that there was a petition to Parliament around a national cat legislation, and that went to select committee, and there was some support from all of the parties that were in Parliament at the time, apart from ACT. We know that there are some interest from some parties in re-looking at that, and so that's something that staff are sort of keeping an eye on as that goes along. It would absolutely be open to council to have a formal position on that. At the moment, it's not something that you've considered and taken a position on, but at any point that's open to you.
Okay, so we don't have to wait for this plan process. Okay. One of the things I think would be really helpful, and I'm really glad to see there's a deliberative democracy process happening as part of this, I think, if that does look particularly at the cat question, I think that would be really helpful for us to understand. And I'd really like to see included in there some information for people about how this works overseas. I'm aware, for example, a number of Australian cities have rules now that do not allow outdoor cats, and that's very much becoming the status quo. And I think if people are sort of aware that we're a little potentially out of step on some of this stuff, that, you know, some of those conversations might be a bit better. The other question I have is that last time we went through this process, the public consultation got very fraught. And in particular, there were some staff who were really targeted, I think, in a way that was unacceptable. So what support are we putting in place for staff who are going to be fronting some of these conversations? Because it's really important that we keep them safe.
Yes, we're acutely aware of that issue. So we've made the call that rather than, so last time we had sort of town hall type presentations, PowerPoint presentation, Q&A type thing around the region, which were quite well attended, but some of them in the cat topic were quite fraught. So we've made a call that we will have that kind of information sharing will be done via webinars instead, so that we've got that ability to keep staff safe, and we will have security at any in-person events, and we'll have a comprehensive health and safety plan around that. Yeah.
Thank you. I would just also encourage you to perhaps have some conversations with the elected member cohort, including local boards, about how we should support staff and de-escalate in those situations as well. I think that would be really valuable.
That's a great idea, and I think really we've learned a lot from last time. We also know that there are some really front-end things that we can do to reduce the likelihood of escalation in the first place. So that's really when we think about how we are communicating this plan, and that real focus on the outcome, the values that we're protecting, and really acknowledging the value that cats have. That this is, nobody is disputing the value of cats as a loved family member. So being really clear about that right from the get-go, I think, is important too.
Great, thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, a very good point, and I know that Imogen, yourself, and I'm sure Sam face some of that unacceptable behaviour, and really somehow positively pulled through that because you knew you were doing the right thing for the right purpose. But I think it's on all of us too to back you up and ensure that we're backing each other up through that, because passion is okay, but unacceptable behaviour is not. So kia ora. There are no other questions, so I'll get you to step back, and we might have a Councillor Fletcher would like to move, and maybe Member Ashby, did you want a second? So we're done here. So thank you very much, just briefly from me, that this is a start of the next process, but it doesn't negate or reduce any of the current plan that was worked on by many people over many years to get where we are. But this is obviously a statutory process that takes some time. But it will include and does include those things, as Councillor Darby said, around the sale and supply of and what Member Ashby said too, plants and animals and things like that. And some of those issues did take some time through judicial review, and of course allowing things like garden centres and pet stores to run their stock out or change the way they're doing, or pick species and plants that can help keep their businesses flourishing without damaging our ecosystem. So it's a broad plan, and this will just be a starter for 6, and everything will come back to this committee or a future committee for final sign off when we have the full plan out. So it'll be a lot of detail, and there'll be more workshops, so no one should feel worried about any details that might be going out to the public, because we will have another look at that. So kia ora, and thank you very much. Are there any other speakers? I think so. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? No? Perfect. Thank you very much. Right. Moving forward on to item 9, the Auckland Water Strategy Annual Implementation Update. We've got Olivia, Tess and Dave. Thank you very much. If you just want to introduce your roles, and I'm not sure who wants to kick off. Oh, Dave would like to. This is a really good, a good news story in many cases. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Chair. This is the opportunity to present the annual report on the Auckland Water Strategy as it was approved in March 2022. And this is an update, the annual report. And so I'd like to introduce Tess Langworthy, Project Manager Water, sitting next to me, and Liv Blanchard, Senior Analyst within the Natural Environment Strategy Unit of the Policy Department. So I'll hand it over to them for about a 10-minute presentation.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. As Dave mentioned, we're here to provide an annual update on the progress of the Auckland Water Strategy over its second year of implementation from July of 2023 to June of 24. And in this presentation, we'll give an overview of progress in that year, highlight some of the areas of risk and mitigation approaches, and identify council group priorities going into year 3, 24-25. The Auckland Water Strategy is our region's 30-year vision towards achieving Te Mauri o Te Wai. The life-sustaining capacity of Auckland's water is protected and enhanced. As Dave mentioned, it was adopted by the then Environment and Climate Change Committee in March 22, along with an implementation plan. And the strategy directs activities across the council group, across 8 different transformational changes and thematic areas. These range from how we partner with Mana Whenua to implement its direction to how we improve the regenerative nature of our infrastructure. And these 8 areas for transformational change are called strategic shifts, and you'll hear us refer to them throughout this presentation. Each strategic shift is underpinned by approximately 5 to 10 actions that aim to advance the direction of that shift with indicative timeframes for those that were set out in the implementation plan. The report itself sets out some of the operating context and engagement approaches that supported implementation over this year, and this slide has some of the highlights from that. Engagement with Mana Whenua included both collective engagement and individual hui. All 19 Mana Whenua entities were approached to meet on implementation and key work areas of the strategy in this year, and 15 were available to meet between March and July, with the remaining 4 to be met with in year 3. Key legislative developments this year included changes to water services legislation and proposed changes to resource management legislation. And it's key for us to note that changes like this at the central government level don't impact our commitment to the strategy or its direction. They can, however, affect how we're able to progress that direction and in what timeframes we're able to do that. The strategy is implemented by staff across the organization, both through embedding its direction in our ongoing work programs and also initiating new work where that's directed by actions in the strategy. And it's important to note that change envisioned in the strategy is long-term, and its indicative scoping for delivery was ambitious. 80% of the 58 actions in the strategy were indicatively scoped to be delivered in the first 3 years of implementation. The annual report for year 2 provides a snapshot of progress in this year by focusing on the status of those 58 actions and how they contribute to the aims of the strategic shifts that they sit within, as well as our progress towards quantitative targets that were adopted with the strategy. The report is just one tool that we use to evaluate implementation on an annual basis, and council staff are exploring more holistic long-term evaluation methods on the impact of the strategy. And those kinds of holistic evaluations, particularly after the significant milestone of year 3, would be an important input to any future changes to the strategy that may be considered. The water strategy was approved with quantitative targets that help us achieve our water efficiency goals by reducing per capita consumption and boosting our recycled water capacity. In this past year, WaterCare's metrics show that per capita consumption increased compared to the previous year by about 14 liters per person per day. This isn't overly concerning and is likely more representative of normal demand, given that the previous 3 years were likely impacted by things like drought restrictions, COVID lockdowns, and the record rainfall we experienced last year. We are still on track to achieve the 2025 target of reducing per capita consumption below 253 liters per person per day. Recycled water capacity increased over this last year to over 22 million liters per day, and this volume represents WaterCare's wastewater reuse in its wastewater treatment plants and some construction projects. It does not include rainwater tank volumes, for which an investigation at Council is underway. Moving into the status of the 58 actions, this slide is a snapshot of the red, amber, green status of those 58 actions across the strategy at the end of year 2. It lays out the 8 strategic shifts there on the left from top to bottom and their supporting actions from left to right. And a red status indicates that the action is overdue. Amber indicates that it's progressing with some challenges or maybe at risk of not achieving the envisioned timeframes. And a green status indicates that it's on track or complete. Specific details on the implementation status of all 58 actions can be found in Appendix 1 or Attachment B to your agenda report. And some of the challenges or risks associated with amber or red actions are also outlined in that appendix. The key takeaway for this slide is that the volume of work progressing across the strategy is massive, and the next slide breaks this down a bit further. Over the 23-24 financial year, the report shows significant progress in the enhancing the resilience of our communities and our infrastructure to natural hazards, and this really reflects the attention and resourcing that's been dedicated to this work over the last year. It also outlines some of the technical work and engagement around improving the Auckland Unitary Plan to better manage fresh water in ways that advance strategic direction to integrate land use planning and water outcomes and take a catchment-based approach to the health of our water ecosystems. And despite that progress on the AUP, we are challenged to embed Te Mauri o Te Wai in our planning framework in the timeframes that were envisioned in the strategy, particularly in how we allocate water. And much of this is due to the shifting central government direction and how that impacts our timeframes in which we're able to do this, but not our commitment to these actions. While the report highlights individual examples of progress across many areas, including community engagement and advancing new partnership arrangements with Mana Whenua, joining up across the council group for the kind of organizational approaches envisioned in the strategy is an ongoing challenge, especially for an organization of our size and breadth. This is especially clear where there's not a clear leading department or a team driving coordination on a specific action. And finally, at the end of year 2, there were 3 actions that remained overdue. All 3 were indicatively scoped for completion within year 1, which was ambitious timing. They've each progressed over this last year and are high priorities for further action in year 3, and details on each of those actions, status and risks, are outlined in Appendix 1 or Attachment B. And we're happy to answer any questions on those actions. They're Action 1.1, apply dual framework to benchmark water outcomes. 5.1, adopt a council position to address affordable water access. And 5.2, develop a plan to address affordable water access in Auckland.
Moving forward, staff are focused on progressing the 34 action scope for delivery by the end of year 3. Given the volume of work, it is not overly concerning that currently 15 actions are on track for delivery, 16 are at risk of not achieving a major milestone, and 3 are overdue. In many cases, amber actions have still progressed significantly in these first 2 years and will continue to progress beyond the indicative delivery dates. Nonetheless, analysing the risks help council understand where more attention is needed, and this includes the foundational risks to the strategy itself. So there are risks associated with the delivery of any strategy. However, staff are committed to undertaking an ongoing risk assessment and mitigation process to address those foundational risks for the strategy. Through this process, staff have identified 2 key risks and their mitigation controls. And as you will see on the right-hand side of the screen, these risks are low organisational support for the strategy and competing priorities and obligations for staff. Both risks are being mitigated with several controls, and these include development of the executive level governance structure within the organisation, scheduled cross-council communications and convening of briefings for key department managers and implementing staff, and the annual prioritisation exercise to influence the council group's allocation of limited time and resources. And in the next slide, I will go into more detail on the priority exercise as a key method of mitigation. So given the ambitious nature of the strategy through its first 3 years, the priority exercise is important to inform departmental business planning. In preparation for year 3, council group staff participated as raters in this exercise, using a set of criteria to rate strategic actions well if they deliver the greatest impact, hold the greatest urgency for completion, are low risk for being derailed or delayed, and have existing momentum or links. You can find the resulting top 10 actions of this exercise listed on page 23 of attachment A, which is the main report. However, on the screen we have summarised the key themes that arose from that exercise. As you can see, enhancing resilience and our partnerships with mana whenua, as well as ensuring efficient, affordable and sustainable water services remain key themes since our last report. And while we have highlighted the key priority themes here, this doesn't mean that other actions won't be progressed over the next year. Instead, the exercise supports council staff to identify where to allocate limited resources for maximum impact to complement work already prioritised through business as usual. The next steps and benchmarks for facilitation and oversight of the strategy's implementation through to July 2025 are outlined in the hour map on the screen in front of you. To summarise, the actions include engagement with council group staff and partners, monitoring and tracking of strategic shift and action progress, and prioritisation of actions still to be progressed beyond year 3. And to close our presentation, I would like to reiterate our purpose of today, which was to provide you with the Auckland Water Strategy Annual Progress Report for 2023-2024 and to seek committee approval of the report. We thank you for your time. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. And I know, once again, this is a huge amount of work and covers quite a lot of the council whānau to get that reported back to us. I'm happy to move, and Deputy Mayor is happy to second. I've got some questions, first from Member Henare.
Oh, morena. So that dual framework that includes mātauranga Māori and benchmarking framework, how come that's overdue? And if it's so overdue, when are we going to see the results?
Kia ora. Through the chair, thank you, Member Hinare. So there has been significant progress to advance the direction to have a dual benchmarking framework, including a draft framework that's been developed in year 1. And over this past year, engagement on that draft framework and this action continued with those 15 mana whenua entities that were met with over the course of the year. The delay in this year really stems from a shift in council's approach from working with a collective mana whenua partner to progress that piece of work to individual engagement moving forward.
Can you explain that again?
Yes, so in the development of the draft framework that was developed in year 1, council staff were working with Te Potaiao, the environment po of the Tamaki Makaurau Mana Whenua Forum, and moving forward we'll be shifting that approach to engaging with individual mana whenua entities to progress that piece of work.
So that means that you will now approach 19 different organisations.
And 15 have been engaged on it in this past year through the engagement that we undertook on the strategy, and then the other 4 will be engaged.
So how long is it overdue by? and when's the report back?
So the action was indicatively scoped for delivery in the first year, and that stemmed from a desire to be able to evaluate the strategy from that dual benchmarking framework. So not just from a council perspective, but also have a mana whenua led and developed way of evaluating our progress towards Te Mauri o Te Wai. And so it is 2 years overdue from that indicative scoping date. But like I said before, there's been quite a bit of progress, and we recognize that the need to partner with mana whenua for the development of that is a key part of delivering that action. And so we're moving at the pace that we're able to in that partnership approach.
So during that process, have mana whenua been alongside all the steps of the way? Or I'm asking, I suppose, not what led to the decision of moving to individual working relationships, but I'm just wondering, was that a push from mana whenua themselves to get rid of the organisation beforehand, or was it a council push and then the new strategy was individual iwi?
Well, there has been engagement and buy-in from mana whenua. The action itself stemmed from engagement with mana whenua in the development of the strategy, and so it really was directed by mana whenua in that sense. And the shift has just been due to the fact that that po, Te Potaiao, that was meeting hasn't been meeting this year. And so the direction was to move towards that individual engagement with mana whenua entities.
So this is I just want to get it right. This is the initiative is a mana whenua one.
The way that it has been embedded into the strategy came from the direction that we received in our feedback in kōrero with mana whenua during the development of the strategy.
Cool.
Yes.
Just the last little one. Everybody knows that we have to address some sort of affordable water strategy going forward. And that's for everybody, businesses, homeowners, black, white, red and green. I'd be concerned if they were green, but there we are. Is there a specific kaupapa Māori push to get that part of it done as well, as part of the affordable water plan?
So that action to develop a council position to address affordable water access has been developed mostly internally within the council group by looking at an investigation of the affordability of water, both for the reticulated and non-reticulated network over this past year. And depending on the future steps for that action and whether it would be something that would require for a council position to have public engagement and wider engagement, that could be something that might be considered at that point. But so far the work has been mostly internal and an investigation.
So it's a yes or a no?
So I was just going to add, which would probably give it more of a yes, is that obviously as part of that evaluation we're looking at different communities and their uses and things like that. So there'll be different characteristics that we want to assess. We already have information that sort of gives an indication as to which people in Auckland may be at a disadvantage in terms of paying their bills, for example. So we do have that sort of socio-economic lens across it. We would obviously be looking to get that engagement targeted to the right characteristics that we want to look at. So I think the answer there is yes.
Kia ora, thank you, Member Hennaday. Good questions. Councillor Baker.
Thanks, team. And I mean, obviously this is a huge piece of work. Just looking at slide 8, and you talk about the low awareness and buy-in across the organisation, and the delivery competes with other departmental priorities and and obligations. What is that lack of buy-in? How does that translate into, and does it translate into the fact that we're actually got a lot of yellow boxes in that, I guess, in the status, and I guess what can we do, because it's a strategy that has been put in place by the governing body that you'd expect the organisation goes, okay, we've got to give that some some punch and some appropriate action, I mean, what sort of direction can we give to potentially the CEO or someone to say, hey, actually, you've got to give this a bit more sort of attention, and is that appropriate? Because it sounds to me it's a bit like local boards previously in the first few years where you couldn't get any punch at all. So what can we do to have you guys stop spending so much of your time, by the looks of it, running around trying to push the arm up the back of people within the organisation?
Kia ora. Through the chair, it is a huge challenge, I think, for any strategy of this size and how that gets implemented across the organization. I think the way that it shows up in the annual report is really through, especially the actions where a lot of progress is happening with different drivers in different places across the organization. But that joining up to take it to that next level for that organizational approach might be missing. And so you'll see that as a key risk in Appendix 1 or Attachment B for many different actions in general. And I think there are lots of different ways that we as a team have looked at supporting that one, awareness of the strategy and really helping staff across the organization become aware of what that direction is, because I think that willingness is often there. Sometimes it's just an awareness of how things can join up for that kind of coordinated approach. And then in some cases, and looking forward, we're also thinking about the strategic investment areas that have been identified as a part of the LTP and how those can be leveraged, since many of them do align with direction in the strategy for those kinds of joined up actions. And then awareness more broadly by the public and others as well, I think, supports that kind of joining up.
Can I just add, we've got statements from the governing body through the or liaison to the CCOs as well, in terms of getting them to identify in their work programs how they're going to implement some of these initiatives. So that's an important option. I think there's also an internal thing about a governance group, and so there'll be probably more of an issue about, and we've been thinking about how we get the relevant senior managers together to make sure that there's a bit more buy-in by the departments. And I think the other comment I'd make is that we'd be wanting to look at the option of, you know, how relevant chairs of a committee, for example, or liaison councillors could fulfil their role in their informal engagements as to trying to ensure that some of these things are taken on board. I think that's the only other thing I wanted to note, is that there's been quite a disruptive year, the year we're talking about, when you talk about the water services reforms and the desire of parts of the council to move into other entities. And so we're in a bit of a position for the current year, 24-25, to have a bit of a reset and a bit of a rethink. But I also wanted to highlight that the strategy in itself is durable and flexible, and has got the option to maintain the governing body's desire to see these outcomes achieved. And I think that's a thing we need to keep in mind, is that the whole point of the strategy was to bring together our different focus on water outcomes, whether it was through a planning lens, an operational lens, a regulatory lens, and actually ensure that there was actually good integration and good complementary activity across the council group. And when I sat in Councillor Penny Holz's room in 2017, it was then an issue of how do we get, you know, you're bringing a lot of advice to committee, how do we get some of this thing better joined up? And so the water strategy, as it then was created, was about sort of trying to articulate our clear strategic direction that we want to see for the region. And basically the key element in doing that is to actually be clear and transparent as how we're approaching that, and so that if you're a department or a CCO, you know what your particular part is in the jigsaw. I think our efforts this year will be very much about trying to attribute a bit more ownership to some of the actions, so that we can get that ramped up within the relevant departments or CCOs.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker, online.
Yes, hi. I've just got a few questions that relate to actions that might be considered for incorporation. So one matter is is around what might be termed best practice as it goes to water management. What do I mean by that? One particular example is the best practice methodology, training and association that's been put in place around the exterior cleaning industry. Now, equally, that could be applied across a range of other business activities that are reasonably generic. Without going into it in a lot of detail, it can cover off conservation, it can cover off reducing pollution of waterways, reducing energy, enhanced performance standards. So my question is it possible to expand best practice as it goes to water?
Kia ora, through the chair. Absolutely possible to enhance that, and I think there is direction in many different parts of the strategy where that kind of work is embedded and is considered, especially around integrating some of our land use management practices and water outcomes. And I know some of the work that's been done over this past year, particularly in updating the Auckland Unitary Plan for freshwater management approaches, would look at some of those kinds of guidance for best practice. In terms of adding additional actions, something that we're starting to consider, and we've mentioned this in our presentation as well, is that beyond year 3, we're hoping to do a more holistic evaluation of the impact of the strategy. And that kind of evaluation could inform the future direction. When the strategy was adopted, the 58 actions that are in it are a great start to achieving some of the direction and the strategic shifts, but there was always an intention to go beyond that and to add to that for that 30-year really ambitious transformational vision of the strategy. And so that's something that could be considered at that point as well.
Okay, so how do I get some confidence that that best practice will be embedded? As I say, it's occurring across one industry, but there are significant water users across the horticultural industry, the bottling industry, and others that can really benefit from best practice, and that goes to the circular economy as well. So how can I have some assurance that we'll be following through on this?
One thing I might add is that WaterCare is actively working with commercial high water users on methods of reducing water use and looking at that consumption and reducing that towards our targets over time. So the quantitative targets that we have are one way of being able to move towards that as well. And so that commitment is part of that assurance.
And perhaps if I could add,
sure.
Best practices something that we would encourage across all the other different disciplines. We don't expect that Department X only looks to implement what it knows in terms of its toolbox. We're basically saying there might be some other tools that you can use as well that would perhaps be more fit for purpose. So I think when we scope out some of the different actions, we would envisage that the people who are doing that can start to consider things like best practice and what part that plays within a response to the action that's been discussed.
Okay, so is that a yes that we're picking up on it then?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. The other question I've got just goes to our engagement with related organisations, and I guess it goes to what might be termed international best practice. There's an entity called Water Sensitive Cities that embodies best practice for cities across water. How are we getting on in terms of joining something like Water Sensitive Cities and possibly other international benchmarking and best practice associations?
Kia ora, through the chair. The Water Sensitive Cities Index was actually applied, which is an international index that comes out of Australia, in 2021 during the development of the strategy, and uses 34 different indicators and a process to evaluate how the city and the region is progressing towards becoming a water-sensitive city. So that was applied in 2021, and the intention is to apply that index again in evaluating the strategy from that holistic sense, again after 5 years, so coming up to 2025, 2026. Additionally, there have been conversations within the organization around membership within the C40 Water Safe Cities Accelerator program. And so this is another international grouping that provides knowledge sharing across different countries. And so that is also being explored internally within Council Group as to what the investments would be needed to be able to join a organization like that, and what the potential benefits of having that kind of access to that international experience and knowledge would be compared to the cost and the investment of joining that program.
Okay, so just in response, I understand the merit of indexing, but membership and support is very useful. I know in the past I've approached Auckland University. They'd certainly be interested in partnering up around water-sensitive cities because it involves university institutions as well. So is that something that we can actively look at joining? I mean, how do we progress that?
So I think General Manager Kat Mackey had been previously exploring this, and there was a question about value for money in response to that particular issue. I guess what I want to just reiterate is what Liv's just highlighted, which is that we can use this tool every 5 years, and that's actually going to give us what we need. And I think a lot of the information that is included, some of the best practice guidelines, are available to us through our own contacts as well. So I believe there was some advice that Kat Mackey was, or maybe has provided already, or was preparing it, a memo. So I just need to go back and check on where that was at.
I also want to add, by picking up on your other point about collaboration with other organizations and innovation type approaches that we can take through those kinds of partnerships. And there is very clear direction in the water strategy under Action 8.6, which is in the pooling knowledge shift, around how we develop external partnerships for innovation, research, and development. That action is indicatively scoped for years 4 to 10. So something that we would be looking at after that more holistic evaluation, and once some of the progress has been made, how we can really meaningfully look to develop some of those kinds of partnerships and leverage those for the next steps of our direction as well. Okay,
and then my last question I've got just goes to the issue around the housing construction methodology of concrete pads versus piling. So is there any interaction between the water strategy and the importance of improving the amount of pervious surface that we've got and resilience to the likes of flooding by changing some of our housing methodology away from concrete pads to piles, and that construction also is much more conducive to things like grey water recycling and water recycling generally. So is that any sort of area that we're investigating or might be looking at incorporating?
Through the chair, absolutely. There's quite a bit of direction in the strategy around what we do on land and how that impacts our receiving environments, and impervious surfaces are a major part of that in thinking about the kinds of impacts on our water sources. And there's quite a bit of attention being paid to that, technical advice and research that's happening to inform how we can update our planning framework to better improve those kinds of land management outcomes and also their impact on our receiving environments, how we can better look at those kinds of practices and the impact they might have on the vulnerability of our structures to water-related natural hazards, including flooding. And so some of that is happening from a planning perspective, and then Council, of course, also has quite a big role as a partner in supporting some of the best practices. And there's also work being done on the Auckland Design Manual and other areas across the organization to think about other ways that we can work with developers and those industries to support the kinds of outcomes we want to see for our water environments.
Okay, so just a follow-up question then. So does the strategy reference any of these other items of work? So we sort of got a joined-up approach?
I don't know that it mentions the specific construction techniques that you've mentioned, but there is really clear direction and an action around supporting the uptake of water-sensitive design and really thinking about and better understanding and managing cumulative effects. And I imagine that those kinds of techniques and things that you're talking about would fit clearly into some of that direction that we would be taking from a broader perspective.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. And you might remember from the workshop on the hazards and the strengthening of the Auckland Unitary Plan process, we are and will be putting a lot of that through that process too, but of course we are waiting for direction from government when they will allow us to change our planning instruments. But that is all in there, and thank you for that reminder. Right, I'll get you to step back from the table. Thank you all. I think already moved and seconded it. Don't think there's any speakers to this. Just double checking. Right. All those in favour? Any opposed? No. Thank you. Thanks very much, team. Right, on to item 10. Got Emma Rush. Now this is a making plan change 81 additions to historic heritage operative plan change. Plan change 82 amendments to historic heritage. See a member here today. Operative in part. So this is we're very much at the end of a very long process here, but I'll just get the team to explain that. Kia ora, Megan. Sorry, I didn't have you on my list.
Morning, everyone. Thanks. This item does relate to something that's at the very end of its process. So the report relates to 2 council-initiated plan changes for historic heritage. Plan change 81 adds 7 individual places and 4 historic heritage areas to the heritage schedule. And plan change 82 updates information and amends the heritage schedule for 99 already scheduled places. The report is seeking your approval to make plan change 81 fully operative and is seeking you to approve part of plan change 82 and to adopt the other part of that plan change because that's subject to the provisions of the Regional Coastal Plan and those provisions need to be referred to the Minister of Conservation for his approval prior to that part of the plan change being made operative. So that's pretty much it, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Kia ora, thank you. I'm happy to move. Councillor Darby would like to second. I don't think there's any questions. No? Perfect. Well, that was easy. Thank you very much for a huge amount of work for this very short item as well. But I know there's been a process before, so thank you. All those in favour? Any opposed? No? Perfect. Right, on to the status update of actions and decisions. We'll have a Deputy Mayor will move. Happy to second. No questions on that. All those in favour? Any opposed? No. Sweet. Item 12, review of the forward work programme. I'll happy to move. Deputy Mayor second. Is there a question? Any questions? No. All those in favour? Any opposed? No. Item 13, Councillor Walker, I'm sure would like to move. No. Okay. Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to second. All those in favour? Right, and we will now move to we will. Yeah, we're going to have. We won't go to lunch. I'm pretty sure that we can get through this. But should we have a 10-minute break for a cup of tea and clear the room? Move to confidential. Oh, I need to move to go into confidential. Sorry. Move to go into confidential. Councillor Baker will second.
Chair, I just want to clarify if there's any part of this that could have been held in the open agenda. I'm not going to oppose going into confidential. I just want to know from officers if there's any information in terms of reports and papers that have already been publicly available. Is there?
Through the Chair, Councillor Fletcher and members of the committee, it is very standard that anything to do with Environment Court appeals, whether it's on resource consent or, in this case, a plan change, is dealt with in confidence. The reason for that is that we will be providing some legal and planning advice that relates to the pros and cons of different approaches the council might take. We certainly wouldn't want that to be in public because it could undermine the council's steps going forward.
I don't want to jeopardise council's position.
Appreciate your understanding.
However, I just want the comfort in a belts and braces sense that there's nothing on this item that could be dealt with in the open agenda.
The only parts of the report are factual, background, context, but they lead in very much to the discussion around the pros and cons of different options. So normally we would see it as an overall package in the report. So the factual information around Plan Change 88, the process to date, that is in the report. I guess that could potentially be on the open, but it's but the bulk of the report.
No, you've answered my question.
It really just sets the scene for the bulk of the report, which is legally privileged. Yep.
Good, Councillor Fletcher. Good to check those things. Thank you. Right, all those in favour? Any opposed? No, perfect. Right, we'll move to confidential. For those online, you'll have to move to the confidential link, and so we'll come back in 10 minutes' time. Thank you. We may as well make it 12, because that's in 13 minutes' time.